Meeting is live now.
So we're good to go, Haruka?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor, look at that. I got promotion. I don't know if that's a promotion or demotion. Anyhow, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Mancini, the chair of the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee, and welcome to everybody this afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And the first thing we'd like to do is do a bit of roll call and check everyone's audio and visual, make sure we're good to go. And beginning with my sister in Dartmouth with District 1, Councillor Daigle Gammon. Good morning, good afternoon, Councillor. How are you?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and fellow colleagues, staff, and members of the public. I'm great down at City Hall, where actually it's really kind of nice because it's air conditioned here, right? So it's a good place to be if you don't have air conditioning at home.
Well, good. Welcome, Councillor. And then on the other side of me in Dartmouth is Councillor Austin. Councillor Austin, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Happy to be here, ready to go.
I see Councillor Cleary has now made his appearance. Councillor, good to see you also. How are you doing in District 9?
Hello, Mr. Chair. Happy to disappear as well if you need me to. Feeling great, everyone. Got a haircut today. It's a great day, sunny, beautiful day in Halifax.
I can relate to feeling good. I can't relate to the haircut, Councillor, but that's another story altogether. Councillor Morris from beautiful District 10. How are you today?
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm very jealous of the haircut that Councillor Cleary got.
Yeah, it was some guy behind his shed that did it, but that's another story altogether. So that's okay.
I'm almost ready to go that route.
I'll join you.
We did receive regrets from Councillor Lovelace. She can't make it today, which is unfortunate, but she did send her regrets. So seems like the roll call is done. We'll look at the approval of the minutes for March 4th, 2021.
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Councillor Cleary moves it. Do you have a seconder?
Second.
Second by Councillor Morris. If there's no questions on that, signify by saying aye to accept those minutes.
Aye.
No one seems to be opposed, so we do have the minutes. Number 3 is approval of order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Do we have any change to the order of business? Appears not, so we can have someone move the order of business.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Daigle Gammon, seconded by?
I'll second it.
Councillor Austin. All those in favor?
Aye.
And anyone opposed? So we now have an agenda. Business arising, any business arising out of the minutes? Seeing none, call for declaration of conflict of interests. No one bought a great big truck, or anything since the last time we met? No? Okay, we're good for there. Notice of reconsideration, well, there is none. And there are motions of rescission, consideration, deferred business, notice of table matters, there are none. And then we come to 10.1 correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Madam Clerk, are there any correspondence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 3 pieces of correspondence has received and circulated to the committee.
Thank you very much. Now we come to presentation time. We have first one up is 10.3.1, our HRM Alliance 7 Solutions. And I believe we have Meredith Baldwin and Kathleen Hall. Are you both with us? Oh, I see them pop up. Meredith, I see you pop up. Kathleen, are you here?
Unfortunately, Kathleen had to send her last minute regrets for today. She had something come up, so you're stuck with just me.
Well, I'm sure you'll do an outstanding job, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. You have Meredith 10 minutes for your presentation. I believe there's a slide deck. Is that correct? That's coming up now. I think that's just coming up. We'll make sure that's up. And we're seeing the slide deck. Is the staff changing the slides, Meredith, or are you doing that?
I believe it's staff. Is it Liam changing the slides?
Yeah, I believe so.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, you know what? Well, welcome, Meredith. The floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes, and we look forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the standing committee members for having me today. Kathleen did send her regrets. I know that she would have absolutely been here if she could. But I will start by introducing myself to those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet. My name is Meredith, and I coordinate our HRM Alliance, along with Kathleen Hall, who is our chair. And I would really like to thank you for taking the time to have me today. I have learned that you are a very popular standing committee to wish to speak to. And I requested the opportunity to speak to share a little bit of an update on our HRM Alliance, who I know has members, I think, in every single one of the councillors' districts who are here today, and to talk about our work that is relevant to you in its relation both to the Halifax Green Network Plan and to Halifax, the Climate Action Plan. So to start off, you can go to the next slide. To give you a bit of an introduction about what our HRM Alliance is, the Alliance is a 65 organization coalition, and we really do have members from every corner of HRM that represent business districts, chambers of commerce, community organizations, as well as environmental, trails, and recreation groups. And the Alliance members came together 10 years ago with the shared goal of a sustainable and prosperous future for HRM. So in two broad strokes, what our HRM Alliance has worked on since is advocating for complete communities, next slide, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, as HRM has also been working to build complete communities across the municipality and make sure that we are building in areas that give residents access to the health benefits of being close by to the places that they need to go to shop, work, do everything that they need to close to home, and also the environmental benefits of building complete communities. Next slide. And then the other half of the work is working on what we originally called the Halifax Greenbelt, and that HRM really took and did quite a bit of work with to end up with the Halifax Green Network Plan. And so the other half of our work is on the Halifax Green Network and recognizing how many immense benefits that recognizing this network and using it to guide our growth can provide to our communities. Next slide. So our HRM Alliance came together over the shared goal of essentially making our growth in the municipality make sense and having some kind of unusual groups aligned to do so. It's one of my favorite parts of getting to work with and support the Alliance is the fact that I do get to have conversations with groups focused on business and then also groups focused on the environment and see just the immense overlap that is there. And there's some really neat collaboration that's come out of that. So in the first year, 2011, the Alliance adopted the 7 solutions, and we were thrilled that HRM incorporated many of them. And now we are in what the Alliance is considering a pretty key deciding moment for HRM with the regional plan review. So our HRM Alliance put together an updated 7 solutions that reflected the great amounts of progress that have happened, but also reflected what more is to be done. And so I'm going to take you through these solutions very briefly within our time to highlight some of the key opportunities that we see ahead in the regional plan review. Next slide. So the first of the solutions, and very relevant to the standing committee, is protecting the Halifax Green Network. At this moment, we have a plan for the Halifax Green Network, but only a small amount of that plan has been implemented. And the reality is that the Halifax Green Network is largely not guiding our growth and development in the municipality. If we're serious about protecting the wilderness and trails, parks, wildlife, recreation, tourism opportunities that I think make this city really great, and I know we've heard from many other people that has been the reason that they have chosen to move to Halifax or stay in Halifax, what we need is for the Halifax Green Network to guide us and guide our growth. And while HRM has taken some really fantastic steps forward here with the protection of the Shaw Wilderness Park, Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes, it's only part of the puzzle. We have to avoid development in wildlife corridors, use land use designation and zoning to direct our development, and we need direction to protect key wilderness areas and a plan for wilderness stewardship in HRM. Next slide. The next of the solutions addresses complete communities. So right now in HRM, we have 35 growth centers that are listed in the current regional plan. And the Alliance believes that this is too many to channel our growth into complete communities. And unfortunately, multiple of these growth centers conflict with wilderness hotspots or wouldn't have access to public transit. The Alliance believes that we really need to be growing only in ways that build complete communities in suburban regions, only in locations that will have access to public and active transit and contribute to developing complete communities through intensification of existing developments. We need a firm criteria for complete communities to help us actually achieve our goal of building them. We need to look at this before approving and moving forward with development decisions. Right now, there are 3 growth centers, which the Regional Plan Themes and Directions report is proposing moving forward with. And the Alliance is calling for, before moving forward with what form that development should take, actually making sure that these are in fact the right places for development. Next slide. Next is building on the part of complete communities. Our growth in Halifax isn't making a lot of sense right now. A study that HRM commissioned from Stantec found that HRM could save about $3 billion over 18 years just by concentrating growth. And the reality is that right now we are allowing sprawling growth that doesn't make sense. We are doing that, and on top of that, we are subsidizing it and making it easier. So there's an opportunity ahead of us to change the way that we grow in the regional plan. And we're thrilled to see that the Themes and Directions report is reviewing infrastructure charges. I think that's a big step. It's also time to look at how we can prioritize brownfield development and intensification first, and then developing out second. Next slide. So we have talked about building complete communities, why they matter for livability, but what complete communities also matter for is climate change. Looking at the timetables, this is our last regional plan review to have an impact before 2030, which is also the year that the IPCC notes that global CO2 emissions will need to fall drastically to avoid catastrophic effects of climate change, saying that rapid and far-reaching transitions in land, energy, industry, buildings, transport, and cities will need to take place to make these changes. We need this to be reflected in the regional plan that we see at the end of this review. If ever, I would say this is the time to pull out every tool that we have in our toolbox, because we really need to act now. So this is why the 6th solution reflects this. It reflects the importance of taking action on climate and doing everything that we can. We need to use the regional plan, and we need to use our growth patterns to act on climate. There was a Canadian study that found that sprawling suburban development can have 10 times the per capita emissions than a complete community. And we also get, on top of that, immense benefits to climate mitigation and adaptation through leaving nature intact. The last thing is that we need to make these changes in a way that centers on actionable and measurable engagement, measuring our successes, actively engaging our communities, and I'm really pleased to see the plans for a public engagement guidebook in the Themes and Directions. Next slide. So next steps from here, this was just a very brief overview. We do have a lot more information on the 7 solutions through a pamphlet that we've put together, so I would love to share that with members of the committee afterwards. And I would also be happy to talk about some of the intricacies of this. This was very broad strokes, covering many different topics, and I really like to get more into the details. So if there's anything that you would like to discuss, I would be happy to do that, and could also potentially pass you on to some of our Alliance members who are incredibly smart and knowledgeable within their own communities. So thank you for your time.
Well, Meredith, thank you very much for your presentation. Truly appreciate you sharing your 7 solutions. I suspect we're just going to change the screen here, and I'll bring up the chat to see if there are some of my colleagues that may have questions. They're not a very shy group, so I would anticipate some, but that was a challenge to them. We'll see if we have any questions. Seeing none. Well, surprise, surprise. Must be the sunshine. They're not used to it on it. Meredith, we appreciate the work you're doing.
Actually, Tony, sorry, I would like to ask a couple questions if I could. I
Sorry,
didn't get
see
my
Kathleen.
hand up fast enough, I guess.
Councillor, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Meredith. Very succinct overview, and I know there's been a lot of work gone into this. I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about the refining the growth centers and where you would like to see the sort of the more priority places that should not be growth centers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. Thank you. So to respond to that, in terms of refining the growth centers, right now there are 35 growth centers listed in the current regional plan. And in the themes and directions report, I believe that there are 3 that are being looked at to move forward and be developed. 2 of those do overlap with places that HRM has identified later on in the themes and directions report as important areas for green space as regional parks, which are Sandy Lake, which I know that you've heard from them recently, and then also Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes. And so what the Alliance is calling for in response to these is not saying that absolutely no growth should happen. It's saying that we need to consider if growth is necessary and if these are the right places for growth to still occur. These growth centers were identified in the last regional plan review, and knowing the criteria under which they were developed is important to knowing if they still are relevant, and especially if they still are relevant within the scope of climate change and also the desire for different types of housing that Haligonians are showing. I know in the last Halifax housing needs assessment, there was a desire found for a large amount of Haligonians for housing that is within complete communities, close to where people are working, has access to active and public transportation. And so making sure that our growth is going to provide those benefits is really important. And then also, of course, looking at the ecological situation of the area. So at Sandy Lake, for example, simply understanding what the ramifications of development at Sandy Lake will be on the existing park is very important. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, that's great. Well, so of the 35, it's just those 2 that you have the most concern about, or are there?
It sounds like of the 35, there are 3 that in the regional plan review that we are specifically looking at moving forward with. And so of those 3, I would say that Sandy Lake and Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes likely need to be reviewed, and we'd like to see some firm criteria around why that growth should happen there. If there is any possibility of channeling that growth into brownfield sites in the municipality and into intensifying existing communities. So those 2 are top of mind right now.
So the action you're asking for is just a review of those 2.
Yeah, some development of criteria for the growth centers, and then looking at those existing growth centers from the lens of that criteria to make the decision of if they do still make sense.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Daigle Gammon, I believe you would like to ask a question or 2.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wasn't as quick getting into the chat as I wanted to, so sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Meredith, thank you so much for the presentation. I think this is the second time I listened to a presentation about our HRM Alliance, and each time I learn a little bit more. You know, it internalizes a little bit more. You present so well. Thank you very much. My question probably at this point is, so for example, in District 1, it is largely rural and suburban, but outside the sort of the transit boundary, for example. And so some part of the suburban nature of my district is outside of like infrastructure. So water, sewer, transit, all of that kind of stuff. But we're seeing immense growth. So how does the 7 solutions balance with the rural suburban community and their growth? How do you guys sort of mesh all of that within the 7 solutions? You know, pieces I see really well, but then other pieces I have a hard time connecting it.
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. I would say, I guess just for a little bit of background, many of the Alliance members do come from more further out suburban or rural communities. So we are so lucky to have that background that is a part of pulling together things like these 7 solutions. So it is shaped around those communities, which is fantastic. And I would say all of them do apply, it's just in different forms. One of the things that I think is most important for suburban and rural communities moving forward, specifically in this regional plan review, but even following, is the suburban and rural plans, which I know comes up in the themes and directions report. And also channeling growth within those communities. So growth is not happening anywhere and everywhere, but that it is centered into communities so we can create more complete communities, more access to essential services and essentially better quality of life, while having the opportunity to better protect parts of the green network. So I think that really is a key opportunity. It seems like at this point, the full suburban and rural plans may be somewhat far out. And so I think any opportunity that we have to make changes through the regional plan review that will affect those communities for the better would be fantastic. And I do know that the transit part of this is for sure a challenge. And to now, the Alliance has been going along with the integrated mobility plan and its recommendations and targets, and how they're reflected right now in the themes and directions report is looking promising. But that's definitely something that we continue to hear from our members on and hear what it really is like when you are in those communities accessing those services. Hopefully that answered parts of your question, but.
It did, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I see no further questions. Meredith, once again, thanks very much. The pamphlet you alluded to, happy to share that with us. If you want to send that to the clerk's office, we'll make sure all the committee members receive it, including Councillor Lovelace, who's not here today. But thank you again, and thank you for the work that the Alliance does. Next on the agenda, we're coming to number 11, information items brought forward. There are none. We're now into 12, which is the reports and discussions. And from staff, the first one up is 12.1.1, Water Quality Monitoring Policy Program and Development. And I believe we do have a staff presentation. And Emma Waddy is with us today. Emma, you're online?
I'm here.
And you have a slide deck, I suspect, too, Emma?
I do, yes.
Okay, are you going to be running that, or is staff going to be running that?
I think I'm running it.
Look at you with all the power. That's awesome. So, Emma, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours, and welcome to our committee, and we look forward to this presentation. I know we're all looking forward to it, but I believe Councillor Austin and I are extremely looking forward to it, if that's possible.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to you and all the other councillors on the call today. I'm going to be presenting to you our staff recommendations for a lake water quality monitoring program for the Halifax Regional Municipality. So I wanted to give a brief overview of previous and current programs that are running within the municipality, just to have an idea of what data exists already. So there had been a municipal-led program that ran from 2006 to 2011, and that studied approximately 50 lakes, just over 50 lakes across the municipality, and that ended in the 2012 fiscal year. There was a subsequent small study that ran from 2015 to 17, and that only looked at 6 lakes. And so it was a pretty specific program that ran just to kind of as a in between this larger program. There is the ongoing beach monitoring program that's run in collaboration with Parks and Rec and Energy and Environment, their planning and development. And this is for beaches that are monitored or by lifeguards, so supervised by lifeguards throughout the summer months. And they take E. coli testing and report any algal blooms. And we then go into further analysis to see if there's cyanobacteria or not. You might have heard about the lake synoptic study that most recently took place this past March. This is not a Halifax managed event, but we do participate in the sense that it's lakes within the Halifax Regional Municipality. It was originally created by DFO and it happens every 10 years. And it's now being managed by in a collaboration with the province and Dalhousie. There are several academic initiatives, as you might imagine, there being multiple universities in our municipality, that there are several researchers doing looking into more specific details about multiple different lakes. And there are also several community-led initiatives. So overall, there is a community concern for our lake health, but right now it's pretty uncoordinated. It's disconnected, it's pretty lake specific, and it really depends on local initiatives and interests. So I often get asked why monitor, especially in this case, why should the municipality be taking on this monitoring program? First and foremost, it's to inform decision-making. It's so that we can have science-based decisions and that our overall, that there is a reason why these decisions are being made. It's also to establish baseline conditions. With climate change, our lakes are going to change, and it's really important to know what is quote unquote normal for these lakes. Some lakes, though there are general kind of parameters that you could say, each lake is pretty specific and has its own quirks and its own interests, depending on the development around it, depending on the geology. There are many different aspects to consider. So we need to know what are baseline conditions. Also, so that when there are changes within the overall lake health, that we can know what we need to do in order to get back to that quote unquote normal again. So really a monitoring program will help answer questions, it'll address key concerns, and it's also sometimes required for other legislated requirements. So in 2019, funding was made available to investigate this, what a monitoring program for Halifax would look like. AECOM was the writers of this report. They received that funding, and they finalized a report in 2020. So they had multiple different levels of stakeholder consultation, and they looked at other municipal examples where there is a municipal-led program, just to kind of build up these three different frameworks that they developed. So they created 3 different frameworks along with multiple recommendations for what a municipal-led program would look like in Halifax. I'm just going to provide a quick overview of what those 3 frameworks look like. The main differences among for these 3 frameworks is the sample size, who's doing the monitoring, and then the cost. So in framework 1, there's going to be approximately 74 lakes that will be monitored. So these are a mix of lakes that are deemed to be have a high vulnerability and a moderate vulnerability. And this high and moderate levels were based off of previous programs or studies that had been run within the municipality before. In framework 1, this is led by staff, but there is community support along the lakes that have active communities and volunteers who are interested in collecting water quality data. So there would be training involved so that HRM staff would train community to collect data, the data that is necessary, as well as additional observational information. For funding, this would be an HRM funded program, and there would be in-kind support from the volunteers who live on those lakes. In framework 2, the main difference here is that only 1/3 of the lakes in frameworks 1 or 3 would be monitored. So these would be lakes that would have major eutrophication issues and very high chloride concerns. So the only 23 lakes would be monitored in framework 2. The other main difference in framework 2 is that this would be more led by communities. So HRM would train staff, the volunteers, but they would be taking a step back in the sense that community would over time would be the ones leading the programs. But this would still be HRM funded. So there would be in-kind support from the volunteers. In framework 3, we go back to that 74 lakes, so the mixture of high and moderate vulnerable lakes. But in this case, there would be no community involvement. So it'd be only HRM staff who would be responsible for all aspects of the program. And again, all funding would be from HRM, and there'd be no in-kind support from our community. So moving forward, we are recommending a program that's based off of Framework 1. And I'm going to explain to you why here shortly. I just wanted to provide a quick overview. I'm sorry, I know a lot of the text in this visual will be difficult to read, but it is directly from the AECOM report, which I believe many of you have received, or all of you should have received ahead of time. But just to give you a brief idea of the span of the lakes themselves. The lighter green are the high vulnerability lakes, and the darker green are the moderate, and then the fuchsia color are the reference lakes. So there are 3 reference lakes and then 71 other lakes across the municipality. In terms of the budget for Framework 1, in year 1, there would not be any sampling, because technically this would be year 1 already, and we're already almost in the summer here. But there would be a lot of prep work that would need to be involved. So this would be determining which community or which lakes already have an active community who are interested in collecting water quality data in their area. It would be purchasing equipment for the groups that are interested but don't have it themselves already. And it would be really kind of getting our house in order. So then year 2, we can hit the ground running and start collecting water quality data as soon as possible. And years 2 and onward would include staffing, sampling costs, some ongoing costs. Those are for things like consumables, different solutions needed to calibrate equipment, batteries, like things like that are one-off kind of costs. There would be some consulting funding in there, and then a small grant program to help support some of the communities. So Framework 1 is essentially a hybrid approach. So it's really interesting because it's like HRM would essentially be a primary investigator, and we'd be harnessing the power of our community. One of the recommendations or kind of observations from AECOM was basically saying there's this large, vast network of community organizations in Halifax, but they aren't utilized. And this approach really meets a lot of the kind of that sweet spot of Halifax collecting data that's like that the municipality is interested in, but also that the community would take ownership in as well. So it meets our data needs and engages our active network of community partners, but it also provides room to grow. 74 lakes is admittedly a lot of lakes to start off with, but there are many, many more that are not included in that list. So this would allow us to see which lakes are doing okay. Maybe we could reduce monitoring in those areas, and which lakes maybe need a little bit more help. I also included the screenshot from an article that came out a few weeks ago in the Toronto Star. It was written by a colleague of mine from the International Institute for Sustainable Development. And this is it was a national program that they were running to investigate and create a business case for community-led programming for water quality data collection. So I think if we do go with this first framework, we really are right on the mark in terms of what's happening nationally as well. So what will be monitored? There'll be a combination of in-field parameters that'll be collected, as well as some samples that would be taken and sent to the lab. So really, there would be a mix of information that would be collected for each lake. Oh, and I should say too, just I have looked, and I would like for just to make that these parameters are in line with the program that ran from 2006 to 2011. So there could be a really interesting comparison made from that previous program. So in terms of a timeline, like I mentioned earlier, this first year would be a startup year, so there wouldn't be any monitoring, but there would be a lot of prep work that would be required so that we could start sampling next year. So in years 2 and year 3, we would be collecting water quality data, and then in that year 3 onward, we'd be able to look at that data, hopefully run some statistical analyses, and compare it to that previous program that I mentioned for lakes that were monitored at that point as well, and create an overall program report, create water quality report cards for priority lakes, and really review the entire framework to make sure that this is working for Halifax's needs, that this is meeting the community needs, as well as that the information that we're collecting is important. and also help identify opportunities for next steps at this point. So one thing it's a kind of a mantra or something I really want to avoid is that we are collecting all this data and not doing anything with it. It's really imperative that once we have these 2 years of data, that information gets analyzed, put into reports, and shared and communicated. There needs to be transparency in what the data is collecting and what that data means. There's also the opportunity at this point, after those 2 years of data that were collected, that we'd be able to create lake management plans for some of those lakes that are at risk or kind of have troubling trends. I'm hesitant at this point to say what exactly the triggers for those lake management plans are, because I don't have the data. And so once we have that data, we'll be able to see what which lakes kind of need a little bit more TLC. And then this is my last slide. I just wanted to kind of share what this will mean for HRM. So once this program gets started, we would have a robust baseline data set of our most vulnerable lakes. As I mentioned earlier, it would cover a broad geographic area, and it would provide an excellent opportunity for participation from our community. This program needs to be looked at as an investment in our natural resources, an investment into our community, as well as tourism and recreation. And I'll leave it at that.
Great. Emma, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Before we go to questions, I think we should put the motion on the floor. And Councillor Morris, would you mind just taking the chair so that I may put the motion on the floor?
Certainly.
So that I'd like to put the following motion on the floor, if I may, then that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that the Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to adapt and implement a detailed water quality monitoring program based on Framework 1 as outlined by AEOCOM in their water quality programming policy and program development report, as outlined in the discussion section of the staff report dated May 6, 2021. So moved.
Second, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. So where do we start? First of all, Emma, I agree that this program is an investment. And I think it's important to understand, some of the history. And you talked about, 2006 to 2011, we did monitor lakes, and be it at the time, it may have been not the high number of lakes we're looking at doing now. But at the time, the history there was a former CAO that said, well, the monitoring of lakes, lake monitoring, and the responsibility of lakes is not the municipality, it's the province. So that program got pulled. However, we understand the province has thousands of lakes, and we venture into areas that are maybe not our responsibility on many topics that we won't get into today. So it is an investment. So some of the questions that I do have, it goes back to that right off the bat, Emma. So we do the monitoring. The first year is the present year, if approved, is getting ready. And the next 2 years, we do the monitoring. So we collect the data, and then we have results. We have data. Well, then what? Especially some of our high risk lakes, what do we do then? Because if we have identified an issue, and even if we have identified the source of the issue, how do we fix it? I mean, that's my first question.
It's a very complicated question, to be honest. I think it really depends on what the issue is, which lake it is, and what the cause of that issue is. Depending on if it's a nutrient issue, if it's a bacteria issue, if it's a issue that's causing fish habitat degradation, it's unfortunate that my answer is going to be it depends, because there are many factors that we just don't know at this point. But
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but that being said, Mr. Chair, the report cards would be one step to kind of indicate maybe the lakes aren't like a lake. I'm not saying this for all the lakes. Maybe the lake isn't as in bad as health as people may think it is, or it could help indicate of what that cause is, and then more conversations can happen. So like this isn't a silver bullet type of situation, but that being said, we don't know what we don't know. So.
Right. I mean, the collecting of data is critical. It's the evidence that we're looking for. There may be situations the municipality can make corrective action. There may be situations where this data helps us to go to the province, who really is the authority here and should be doing this, and to advocate for that. So I understand that. I just want to make that clear for those that are watching and manage the expectations too, because we get calls all the time. There are concerns about our lakes, and you identify what lakes are at risk, and our lakes are precious to us. And I think this pandemic is making us realize all the things that are precious to us, including our lakes. So, so the budget has been, correct me, has the budget been approved for this for the next 3 years? Then is that accurate?
Hi, Councillor Mancini, Shannon Niedema, Manager of Energy and Environment. I'll just pipe in here. We have the funds for year one. They were approved in this year's operating budget. This is operating dollars. So we made sure to have enough funds requested in this year's budget to get moving should you approve the program. If you approve the program, then those monies will be put into the future year's operating budget as well.
Okay, excellent. Good. Thank you, Shannon. And my last question is, how do we get the results of the monitoring, right? And how often will we get those? How quickly are we able to share it with our residents once the monitoring takes place in next year?
So the frequency of monitoring for framework one, we would be collecting samples twice a year. And so we'd be collecting in the spring and then in the probably mid to late summer. And then we would have to receive all that information back from the labs and do some analysis in-house and kind of prep it kind of thing. So right now in this framework, in this plan, we wouldn't be able, it depends on if we want annual reports or if we want there to be a framework review only after 2 years of sampling. Yeah, again, I guess it would depend. I'm not sure, Shannon, if you want to respond.
Yeah, no, I'll just add in that, we are planning on, just like the trend for the city on everything, making data open through our open data network. And so the public can use it, especially, we know researchers are really interested in it. We know there's some other researchers doing lake testing that we would want to receive their data as well. So I think, we have a commitment to transparent and quick sharing of data once it's vetted. But we also know that just throwing up data into open data isn't accessible for the public. So that's why we're looking at those report cards and how can we give the public a good understanding of what we're doing and what it means, snapshots for the lake, infographics, and if you want to dig deeper, here are the links to go away and do that. But here's the quick snapshot. We've talked about some misinformation and how to better educate the public on water issues. So that's kind of top of mind for us as well.
Thank you. My last quick question then is if this motion is passed today, what's the next step again? I know you had the next step slide up there, Emma, but if this motion gets passed today, what happens next? Where does it go next? Does this have to go to regional council? Do you just start activating and getting ready for next year? Can you explain that to me?
Thank you. Yeah, so my understanding is that, I might let Shannon explain the council part of it, but if it does get approved, what this next year would really be about a prep year. It would be about kind of seeing which lakes out of those 74 lakes already have community organizations that are either actively monitoring or interested in monitoring. It'd be about building those partnerships and purchasing equipment for the groups that don't already have it, and kind of creating those operating procedures so that everybody is trained so that next spring people can start collecting data.
Thanks, Emma. And the next step here from a procedural point of view, Shannon?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that you're recommending to regional council to approve the program, so it would go to the next available regional council agenda. And yeah, this year we'd be basically building the program, right? Getting it set up. Emma mentioned all the community groups and getting them set up, but there's also, HRM would be committed to doing the sampling for all of those 74 lakes that don't have a community group ready and willing to do the testing. probably quite a lot of lakes will be tested by HRM proper. And then maybe over time, as there are more community groups and more interest and more training, more of the lakes will be tested by community groups.
And obviously, reach out to the counselors to help you with the community groups and connect with them. Thank you both for the presentation. Madam Chair, I'll give it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, I see a comment from Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Emma, thank you for the presentation. If I remember on Framework 1, and this is probably building on the last comments around the partnerships within communities. So Framework 1 is community-led. So would the watershed advisory committees that are in place, I think that there are, more than a few around HRM. And so will they be involved as a community partner? Would you see them as a legitimate community partner looking at the lakes?
So through the chair to you, Madam Councillor, my understanding with the regional advisory, watershed advisory boards is that they're to advise the program. So we already received some advice from RRAB back in March, I believe.
Okay.
Or was it even February, but earlier this year, they helped us they've read a lot of advice about the AECOM report that went into this recommendation report. For the program itself, for the specifics, there is a lot of information in the AECOM report in terms of what should be collected, how it should be collected, the frequency, and we've built upon that based off of my experience and kind of having worked with community organizations for the last several years at this point. So our RAB would be more so for advice if we have maybe questions about what the results to interpret the results. But for building up the program, I don't believe that they'd be utilized. And I might just defer to Shannon if she has any other thing to add that.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Next is a question from Councillor Cleary.
Thanks. Actually, Councillor Daigle-Gammon asked one that I was going to ask around RWAB, because I remember this committee forwarded the AECOM report to the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board back in February. And in the summary table 18, 5.5.1, under the heading of clearly defined roles, it actually includes RWAB as one of the council staff, RWAB as a group that will sort of be involved in this. And I appreciate your comments, Ms. Waddy, around sort of what kind of advice they'll be providing. I support this wholeheartedly, and Framework 1 is obviously, I think, the best one because it brings our expertise, your expertise, and our resources, but includes the community. And there are lots of lakes that have groups that are doing this work. For example, Williams Lake Conservation Company has been monitoring Williams Lake for decades. And so they already have many years of data, not on all points probably that we'll be looking at, but that there is a baseline there already. It's been studied at least by several DAL masters and PhD students recently even. And so, there's lots to do there and they're ready to go. So I've been giving them some district funding for some of the work that they've been doing. And now that'll get freed up or not. I don't know, maybe it'll just get diverted to other things in the area. But now we'll actually have that. And I was looking for the actual AECOM report because I was trying to find it there. It wasn't attached to this particular document. And I know it's quite a large report. The 74 lakes, is there a list of those somewhere? I mean, I can imagine I can already probably name 20 or 30 of them, but I certainly can't name 74. So that's a lot of lakes to be monitoring. I would assume most of them are kind of urban, but there will be some suburban and rural lakes, obviously to get a flavor of everything. So is there a list somewhere we could look at, or is there, because I was looking on our website for the AECOM report and I couldn't find it.
Yes, through the chair to you, Mr. Councillor. Yes, that list of lakes are available online. or not, sorry, not, well, the AECOM report is available online. I believe when it went through ESSC to RAB earlier this year, it was made public. So that is, I'm sorry if it wasn't part of the report attachments, but it is available online. And within the actual document itself, it does list those lakes, and it kind of goes through different classifications of that high, moderate, and low vulnerability. I did have on that slideshow, one of the slides kind of to show the geographic span of those lakes. So there is a mixture of kind of more urban and more suburban and rural areas.
Awesome. Thank you.
I might just jump in to say that, if this program gets approved, we would be putting content on our website. Like currently nothing lives on the energy and environment kind of pages because it's still a question, but we'd be pretty quick to put those 74 lakes up so that everybody, because that'll be a question, is our lake included in the 74? Why not? Like we recognize that. So we'll be pretty quick to put that online should it be approved by Regional Council.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cleary. And next up is Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. And thank you, Shannon and Emma, for all the work that's gone into this. It's been a long time coming. I know my very, very first council meeting when I was a newbie, I hadn't even found the bathroom yet. Councillor Mancini sitting next to me moved the motion on bringing back the Lake Water Quality Program. So it's been a long road to get to here. And I'm very happy to see this back because to Emma's point, you can't fix what you don't know about. And unless you're out there doing monitoring the health of our lakes, we don't have the opportunity to even identify what the problems are, let alone solutions. And I've said it before, but when we think about what's going on in urban and suburban lakes, I mean, the suburban lakes, like I think of like First Lake and Lower Sackville, I mean, they're impacted by development as much as urban lakes are. It's rural. We don't have as much agricultural use in our municipality, so it's a little less so. But this is not a regional center intense development alone issue. It's an across the municipality sort of thing. And when I think about the issues that are caused, that are being caused by human activity in our lakes, it's salting the roads. We do that. It's development. Guess who regulates that? The impacts are on recreation. Hey, that's something we do. So, it's all well and good for us to point the finger at the province and say, this is your jurisdiction. What are you doing? To me, it's semantics because the causes of the issues and the impacts of the issues are mainly on us. So I'm very supportive of this. That's not letting the province off the hook, but to say that we don't have a role here, I think does not make sense at all. So I'm very happy to see this back. I like the recommendation that's coming forward about the hybrid sort of approach. There is a lot of community groups out there doing good work. In my district, I think of Oat Hill Lake, which is kind of the gold standard for our community monitoring group. But at the same time, I'm glad that we're going to have a role because the thing I've noted in my district is not every lake is going to be fortunate enough to have some retired, well-educated, well-off folks that have the capacity to then go out and do this sort of stuff and volunteer and take this on. What happens if we leave it to community alone is Williams Lake, Oat Hill Lake, they get gold star monitoring programs. Lakes like Maynard Lake, like Big Albro, they don't, right? Because the surrounding community doesn't have that capacity. And so I think I'm enthusiastic about this. The one question I have is around the community involvement area, because that can kind of run the gauntlet. It can be, okay, community group, I'm going to provide you with some money to go do these activities. Thank you very much. Good luck. or it can be a lot more of a hand-holding sort of thing, like what we do with our community gardens, right? Like in the Parks and Rec world, if you want to start a community garden in a park, we have staff that will literally go to the ends of the earth to try and help you make that happen. And I'm just wondering, like, where we anticipate us kind of landing on that continuum. Are we going to be basically handing people money and, you know, go do the thing, or are we really going to be engaging with people, kind of organizing? Like, what's that really going to look like?
Through the vice chair to you, Councillor, that's a great question, and definitely there's always a range when it comes to community-based monitoring. I always kind of explain that as a spectrum of there being people who are just observations, like, oh, I noticed that the peepers are back, awesome. And then people who are, for example, like Otahoe Lake or Williams Lake, where people are dedicated, they're out there with their own boats, they're investing their own time and money. And so really those are kind of two ends of the same levels of engagement. And I think with this program, it'd be about capacity building, and we wouldn't be expecting everybody to have the same standard as Otahoe Lake or Williams Lake, because they also had to start somewhere too. And so to build a program that is accessible to multiple communities, to multiple areas within HRM, and then to see what the capacity is with locally, so that they themselves aren't burning out. I've helped in my previous role before I started with HRM. I've worked with community organizations who have started their own monitoring programs. And the one thing I always say is to not bite off more than the sustainable, to bite off more than they can chew. And I think that's with this program where we have pretty clear guidelines, and it's only sampling twice a year. That's achievable for most organizations or most groups who are first forming, or as well as for groups who are already existing and part of their own programs. So we want to make something that's that is that baseline, but that can build capacity within those organizations over time, so that HRM can take a step back and not be hand-holding, hopefully. And hopefully over time, put that effort into other lakes that are needing some extra help.
On that continuum, would we consider situations where, like, I mean, sometimes for some folks, like, you know, they might be interested in volunteering, but the idea of, like, well, I'm going to go out and form a nonprofit, I'm going to round up a bunch of people, we're going to have an executive, we'll have an AGM every year. I mean, not everyone's interested in doing that, but they would be more than happy to, you know, there's some people that say, oh, I'll go take a sample in the lake every week if you want me to, right? Like, and so there's, on that continuum, do we anticipate, you know, a role for HRM in the marshaling of volunteers, if you will, like even even when there's a lack of a formal organization, if there's an interest in a community?
I definitely see that. I would hope that the mixture of community organizations would be, like, you know, some that would be a bit more experienced, others where it's just like a couple of neighbors who just want to have reason to get out into the water. So there would be a kind of a mixture of all those different groups. I don't think there's a need for it to be an official organization at this point. You know, we wouldn't have those requirements of there needing to be a charitable nonprofit and having an AGM and all those things. It's more so just engaging the community of people who are concerned around their lakes.
Awesome. I think with that sort of lens, you'll have way more uptake potentially than if you're asking people to kind of form that formal organization, at least as a first step, right? I mean, if it can literally be, hey, neighbors around, you know, X lake, who's interested in doing some volunteer work and to take care of the lake, I think there could be a lot of interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Austin. I'm wondering if I could ask Councillor Mancini to resume the chair. I'd like to ask a question myself, if that's okay.
Absolutely. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I think, Emma, you mentioned this briefly, but I'm wondering if at the end of this, there'll be some potential for policy recommendations. We know some of the reasons why our lakes are are struggling in some cases. So I'm wondering if you think once you have the data that you'll be able to perhaps come up with some policy advice or directions.
Through the chair to you, Madam Councillor. Yes, I would hope that this information would be used more so than just kind of indicating the state of the lake. In the case studies of the AECOM report, there were a couple different examples of when and how these municipal-led programs have been utilized by the municipality to change policy. The best example is in Kings County, and that's a volunteer-led program. I would say that's more so of the framework 2 example, but they did have changes in their land use bylaws in terms of setback and land uses around their lakes because of data that they were collecting and the analysis of that data from the community group, the community. And that's another great example of it just being people who live on the lake. It wasn't necessarily groups or organizations collecting the data. So yeah, my hope would be that it would be used, and especially with the regional plan happening, review happening right now, I think there are opportunities through various different plans of where and how this data could be used. I'm not sure, Shannon, if you want to add anything to that. Okay.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor David Gamble, did you want to ask a second question? She was.
No, I'm good, thank you. Just
Okay.
having a few internet issues, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I'm seeing no other questions from the committee. We'll put the call for the question, and all those in favor of the motion that's on the floor signify by saying aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Well, that motion is carried, and I'm thrilled, and I think we all are, to see the work. Emma and Shannon, thank you so much. A long time coming. We're looking forward to it. It now goes to Regional Council, as Shannon has identified, and I'm sure we'll be sharing this with our residents. Emma, could you share your slide deck with us also? And then the AECOM report that we all had a chance to take a look at, that Councillor Cleary asked about it. If you could just send the link with that also, that'd be appreciated. Thank you both for the work. Thank you, committee, on this one. Fantastic. Well done. All right. So next on the agenda, we have 12.1.2 regional plan review, and there's a staff presentation, and we have a long list of folks and planners that have been involved in this one. Is Kate Green, are you the lead on this one? Who's going to be the lead on this one?
I am. Yeah, I'll be leading the presentation.
Kate, good to see you. We have not seen you yet. I'm sure you turn your camera on. We'll see you shortly.
Yeah, I will. I thought it was on, but I think I just started to share my screen. So let me do that and bring my window up, and then I'll turn my camera back on.
While you're doing that, we can talk about the construction that's around your neighborhood. Have you spoken to Councillor Austin about that?
I've been meaning to do that, actually.
Yeah, so we'll let him stick around at the end, and you can have that conversation with him. So whenever you're ready, Kate, the floor is yours. And obviously, if you could introduce the team that's been involved in this work, that'd be fantastic.
Great. Absolutely, will do. Thank you so much. And can you see the presentation yet?
Yep.
Great. All right, well, we'll get going. Thank you so much for having us here today on your agenda. So as noted by the chair, my name is Kate Green, and I'm the Regional Policy Program Manager. You can see here a bunch of faces here at you. I said previously, normally these folks would be sitting with me and nervously sitting there with binders at committee. But this is a look at the core project team that's working on this file. They're a great group of people, and it's been a real pleasure to work with them. I, as Brad English says, know enough to be dangerous. So these people are the real experts. I just get to be a bit of a talking head today. And of course, you can see here the Regional Plan Review Steering Committee listed, as well as the key contributors that help pull together the document that we're here to talk to you about today, the theme and direction document. A lot of people across the organization have participated on this just because the regional plan draws on so many of our different pieces of work. So first up, this is a little bit of an overview of what we'll touch on today. We'll talk about why we're here, how we're going about engaging the public, and then we'll delve into the themes and directions and a few of the themes and policy actions that we think are particularly relevant to this committee and your mandate. So we're in the middle of reviewing the regional plan, and the theme and direction document is our first major deliverable. The Community Planning and Economic Development Committee is our primary advisory body, and we started with them in this month and a half long engagement period on May 20th. And this engagement period will close on July 16th. But just back a little bit for the public and anyone who might be watching, the Halifax Regional Municipal Planning Strategy is a strategic document. And it was really one of the first documents that we created post-amalgamation that provided a region-wide vision for land use. And it was first adopted in 2006, but it outlined an approach to growth that would occur over the horizon of the plan out to 2031. So really this creates a strategic policy direction. It says where, why, when, and how we go about building and growing our community. Here's a little bit of a deeper look at our plan and its timeline. It was created first in 2006, reviewed for the first time in 2014, and that was known as RP+5. Some of you might be familiar with that brand. We are aiming to have this review done in 2022. This is the second review, and you can see there the end of the plan horizon at 2031. You know, the regional plan is one of the main land use documents that we've been keeping up to date over time. It's in a continual state of improvement. And I also want to say and note that, you know, between 2014 and today, work didn't stop on the plan. We did a lot of additional study that the 2014 plan identified, studies like the open space plan, cultural plan, road network plan, climate action plan. These all were identified in 2014 as areas we needed to study in more depth in order to better direct growth in our community. So these have resulted in names you're familiar with, like the Integrated Mobility Plan, Green Network Plan, Sharing Our Stories Plan, that's coming soon, and Halifax 2050. These are all priorities plans that now we're responsible for taking a look at and bringing back up into this new regional plan. So we're taking all those directions that were identified and knitting them together into this new regional plan. So in that sense, the regional plan can be a pretty powerful tool for creating change. So again, we're aiming for 2022. We're in phase 2 right now. This is a little bit of a deeper look at our project timeline. Right now, we're conducting widespread engagement, and that will take us until July 16th. We will be coming back to community planning and economic development with the results of that engagement, and then likely back to committee of the whole or council sometime in September to just solidify that engagement, solidify the policy framework and the way forward on this work. Phase 3, 2022, once we get that okay, we'll draft a set of amendments that will go out again for public engagement, likely in late 2022. So we're engaging the public, as we always do in planning, and we're using a combination of virtual tools and really relying on community networks to get the word out. There's a lot of engagement happening right now, so we're sort of competing for airtime, but our big social media push will be happening today, and our survey is live today. You may have seen a PSA, a public service announcement, go out today. So we're getting out the word today on that our regional plan is open and this theme and direction is out in the world, and we'd love to receive feedback. You know, in addition to meeting with stakeholders and community groups, we're meeting with all the standing committees, advisory boards, and also internal staff teams. So for your knowledge, the source of truth here is our Shape Your City web page. This is just a quick look at that web page. And anything you need to know about the regional plan, you can find on that site. Again, on the left, you can see our important engagement dates. We are open in this comment period until July 16th. Our survey is open also till July 16th. We will have virtual presentations and Q&As on key topic areas, and those are really identified as we did early engagement in phase 1 of the plan. These were sort of the topics that came to light the most as we talked with people, issues we felt like it was important to focus on and have dedicated time and engagement on them. So the theme and directions, what exactly are they? These are really the key ideas, issues, and potential changes that we'll be undertaking as part of the review process. So that document really shares the ideas that are at play and provides the details of the work we want to do. And we really want to demonstrate the scope of this and ask everyone, the public, regional council, all our stakeholders, are we going in the right direction? You know, this is the chance for everyone to sort of say, yes, you've got it right, or no, you better tweak that. You're not quite headed in the right way. So it's an important point in the plan process. And obviously we'll share that with council, what we learn in here. So the document is a decent sized document because we wanted to really make all the material accessible. It's wide ranging, the topics that the plan covers, and we really people wanted to dig into the ideas and concepts. We wanted to give people that material. So it's available on the web for everyone, but we also summarized the material into a key ideas document. And I'll take a little bit of time just to go through the key principles, the tenets, you could call them, that are guiding this plan review. So the first is that we can decide how we want Halifax to grow. And I'll apologize in advance to any members that were at CPED, because this will be a little bit repetitive, but hopefully you'll have it memorized by the time I'm done all the rounds at committee and council. So we can decide how we want Halifax to grow. We can really build the kind of community we want to see Halifax become. The growth we're experiencing offers us the opportunity to mold and shape Halifax, and not all communities get that chance. But as more people choose Halifax as a home, we really need to adapt quickly to accommodate the growth. And we know that many of our citizens are vulnerable to pressures that exist in our housing market right now. By being clear about where change will occur, we can organize municipal and provincial investments and infrastructure to support the long-term fiscal, environmental, and social health of the municipality in Nova Scotia and the Atlantic region. We can make smart decisions about housing and employment and use the regional plan to quickly direct growth to the right places in a way that furthers our community goals and builds a healthy, thriving economy. We can create change through new partnership. That's the second item there. We must act on our commitments to change with the Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian communities and make it a priority. We must work together to identify and change policies that have furthered structural racism and disproportionately impacted these communities and residents. It is now clearer than ever that population growth and development cannot be considered without a view to greater socioeconomic well-being. We can make it easier for people to move. The third tenet, that's our integrated mobility plan live in the flesh. So congestion, commuting, traffic safety, parking. While many North American cities have been built for cars, we know that cars are an inefficient way of transporting large numbers of people, particularly during peak hours of traffic. We need to rethink how we are building our cities so that it becomes easier for citizens to move, and so that we build places that are people-oriented while we grow. We can protect what matters. So we can use the regional plan to strengthen and protect important natural and cultural places. Halifax, our region, is absolutely beautiful, and we have a unique blend of city and nature that we cherish. And I hearken back to the branding strategy that we did many years ago, but we consulted a lot of people during that process. And that idea really came through strongly, that people really value this blend of urban and rural and natural and sort of urban. Many communities are centered on little pieces of our stunning Nova Scotia coastline, and others have grown around our abundant lakes and waterways like we're talking about today. So our suburban areas have special wilderness and natural areas. You heard about that in the first presentation, that we know are critical to protect. So we can use the regional plan to strengthen and protect important natural and cultural places. And last, we can transform. So we are resourceful and community minded. We know that Halifax is one of the best places to live in Canada. And COVID-19 has shown us that we can band together and that our social networks are really strong in Atlantic Canada. But we need to do more to support vulnerable citizens, and we need to focus on housing. We need to focus on creating greater well-being for our newcomers and people of all ages and abilities. We are at an important point in Halifax's journey and in our global journey in fighting the pandemic, decolonizing, and acting on climate change. We can use the regional plan review to help us generate ideas about how to change and transform as a community. So thank you for allowing me the time to go through that, but I think it's important to understand the ideas at play and really alive in community right now. So here you can see our 11 themes. I will not go through all of them. That would take a lot of time. I'm not even going to read them out to you today. But I can tell you that there are 11 of them, as you can see, and they're really responding to that strategic direction that's come out of our economic growth plan, Halifax, even older versions of the regional plan, how we're bringing the regional plan forward, that's all influencing these themes and what we've heard from community over the past 4 years. And council, we listen a lot to council and make sure we're listening to what you're saying. So in addition to those theme areas and some detail around the policy actions we'll take in those theme areas, we've created issue papers. And these are focused, they're deeper dives, technical papers in key areas that we know we need to focus in on in developing this next framework. So the first is preliminary housing and population analysis. We've done some population projections and thought about how that might impact where growth is going to occur. We're creating an issue paper on affordable housing and what we think our role is evolving to be over the coming number of years. We've written a paper on density bonusing, so that outlines an interim regional approach to density bonusing that has been talked about a fair bit at council. We've written a suburban community planning paper and rural community planning paper. Those are both on our website now. Those are a first step at outlining some of the planning principles that could inform the suburban and rural frameworks, the plans that we want to develop. And we know that's something council has talked about a lot, that they would like to start to get at and get at those principles, especially as we face growth pressures in those areas. And last is the open space primer. This, we heard at the beginning, there's a lot of discussion about how do we protect really important ecological lands. And that's been a key thing that's been raised in the Green Network Plan. And we're trying to bring all the plans together. And we think it's important for everyone to have the same foundation and thinking about, what are our powers as a municipality? How can we protect land? What can we do now? And to have that be part of the conversation, so we're all starting from the same place. So that's in that open space primer, which is also on our website. Lots of material for people to dig into should they wish to get into the technical side of this work. But today here at Environment and the Sustainability Standing Committee, we want to speak to 4 themes. So the first one is considering the regional scale. The second one is building healthier and more complete communities. The third, enhancing environmental protection. And the fourth, leading through action on climate. So we'll just take a few moments to delve into those a little bit more thoroughly, just because those are the focus of this committee. So up first, considering the regional scale. This is the foundation of the regional plan. Like, the value in the regional plan is that we step back, we look at the whole region, and we say, okay, where should growth go? How should we organize this? What makes sense from an environmental, economic, and social point of view? How do we build our community as we grow? And in other points in time, that could be about how the community declines, but we're in a place where we're talking about how the community is growing. So we are talking about deciding where the growth should occur. I talked about the population and housing growth analysis. Really, HRM's done a good job with the 2006 regional plan of creating a growth management boundary. And that was organized around where pipe services are, where we have water and wastewater services. And that sort of controls where we want to put significant amounts of development and infill. And we've limited the development in the outer lying areas of the municipality. And that urban service boundary is a really important planning concept. And early on, even prior to the 2006 regional plan, we did a lot of study about where were the right places to go to grow. So we've identified those in the regional plan. And the way the regional plan works, it sort of says, when you've got a need, you should bring these lands online and extend services to them. Because you have to bring more housing online, and then you do a master plan at that point of time. The communities we know of that have come on online that way are Bedford West, Port Wallace is underway right now. Those are master plan communities, and we are recommending that we start to think about a process for a few of the other major growth areas. Sandy Lake, Highway 102 West Corridor, and Morris Lake areas. So these are places where we've said maybe we should expand the service boundary. I want to clarify that there are other places identified in the regional planning framework that are called growth centers. And those are loosely defined in the regional plan as places we want to do secondary planning, consider additional growth. But those are a little different than these key future service communities that are identified in the regional plan. So another key point for this group is that we want to use the concepts of the Green Network Plan to assess and consider ecological connectivity. So I'll point out one more thing. We're talking about lifting the urban reserve designation from the ACOMA lands as well, which is as a result of the direction in the road to economic prosperity. So that's a little different than some of these other service communities. So the regional plan, in thinking about growth, it organizes us around rural, suburban, and the regional center. It creates growth targets. It says 75% of growth should occur within urban communities. That's the regional center and suburban, with at least 25% occurring in the center, with 25% of household growth going to rural areas. So that's what it said in 2014. In 2016, 2017, the center plan came along and it set out a frame where it decided to allocate 40% of total household growth into the regional center. So the center plan that you're looking at right now has taken that line, because the study that we did, the Stantec scenarios study, said the more growth you put in the center, the healthier it is for the municipality, the easier it will be for people to move in that area, the more you can lower costs in how you service development. And then the integrated mobility plan came along after that, I think in 2017, although I don't have my numbers here right in front of me. But it said, well, 40% of growth in the regional center is great, but if you really want to meet your mode share targets, that is mode share targets that are targets for getting people out of their cars and into other modes of transportation, then you need to concentrate 90% of growth inside the urban boundary, with 10% in rural areas. So those are the sort of scenarios for growth that we're testing under this review. And just to give you a little bit of a side note, we looked at how many household units have been built between 2014 and 2019, and we'll update this with 2020 data, but there's 32% growth occurring inside the regional center in that horizon, 54% in suburban communities, and 14% in rural. So this map shows you what I was chatting about. You can see outlined in blue the major growth centers, Sandy Lake, Bedford West, Bedford South, Highway 102 West Corridor, Port Wallace, Russell Lake, and Morris Lake. Those are the major growth areas that Council had previously identified as places where growth should come online, services should be extended in order to accommodate our population. So those were expected to come online at 1% growth within the life of the 2031 horizon. And then the urban reserves, which you can see there in yellow, were sort of reserved. Holding zones were sort of placed on them, urban reserve zones actually, that said, in 2031, we should start to look at these and think about bringing these online to accommodate additional growth. So that's sort of the frame that we were working with in the earlier iterations of the plan, and also in 2014. Again, you can see there in red the four really remaining growth centers: Bedford West, Bedford South, and most of Russell Lake has been developed, but we're in the middle of working on Port Wallace. Council's initiated that, but Sandy Lake, Highway West Corridor, and the remainder of Morris Lake is still waiting and has not been initiated formally by Council. So here's a little snapshot of some of the way that we're thinking about land use on a regional scale. So we're especially focused in on right now the center, suburban, and sort of the periphery in thinking about where major intensification should go. You can see the regional center has a few corridors, the downtowns, outlying centers. These are the places where a lot of intensification should go. And then we've taken the rapid transit strategy and sort of identified where along those corridors we might be able to place additional infill. And you can see we've loosely applied the regional center designations just to give us a sense of how many units we might be able to accommodate. And then you can see around the edges, the future service community and the urban reserve communities. And we're thinking a lot about how these connect with the transportation network, and then also how they relate to the findings of the Green Network Plan and assessing how we're going to bring forward and bring new development online. So just coming up to theme 2, building complete communities. So that's sort of the regional picture of what we're assessing and looking at. And theme 2, building complete communities, is the second layer to our framework. So the regional plan sits, it covers the whole region. And then underneath that, we have secondary plans that guide more community focused planning. So community scale plans. So we've done one for the center plan, and our next step is to build one for the suburban areas and then rural areas. So the regional plan can work ahead a bit, create some direction for that. And again, I mentioned those issue papers. Those are the beginning of setting up that framework. So we'll be reclassifying different growth centers in that area. Part of what we've been talking about with council is we really need to look at not just where wastewater and water and transit are located, but also think about where wilderness areas are located, employment lands, important multi-use facilities, just really do a better job planning for libraries, schools, all these pieces of infrastructure, particularly because we're growing at the rate we're growing. I've been talking a lot about, we've been growing at we've been taking an incremental approach to growth. So we sort of say, okay, well, we've been growing at this pace and it looks like we should put some people over here and maybe we need an interchange and we probably have to upgrade this wastewater system underneath the Shubenacadie Canal, and we do a lot of work around that. But what if we could plan for a larger future of growing as a larger municipality and then work backwards to really invest in a coordinated way and make sure our facilities planning is organized around that? It's possible and doable, and I think that's more of the direction we need to head in. Another thing we've been talking about is the idea of Halifax Water's done a good job differentiating between regional scale planning and local planning. And I think we need to do more work differentiating between sort of those scales of projects and how everything comes together to create the community that we want, organized around the goals that we have. So just another little side note, we know that councils has an interest in interim design guidelines for suburban development, so that's part of our work program. And we know we want to review our conservation design policies. They haven't been working that great, so that's also built into our program as well. All right, so getting into more of the meat, that's the larger framework, but getting into more of the meat of enhancing environmental protection in this group. So the Green Network Plan Ecology Map has been a really important map. It's sort of brought together the findings of the Green Network Plan and identified where there are areas of high environmental value, where there are corridors, essential corridors or important corridors. So it has added a new layer of information that maybe we didn't have when we had the first regional plan or even the 2014 regional plan. So now we have to assess what that says and the interactions between where we wanted to place land use and these important ecological areas. So that is a key underpinning of the work that we need to do in areas, as mentioned earlier, like Sandy Lake, Highway 102, also Morris Westwood Lake, and Ragged Lake. So we also know how the value of naturalization and green infrastructure, that's a key tenet in the Green Network Plan. And I think we've all seen as COVID has happened, how important outdoor space has become in a way that maybe it wasn't before. And we also know the value of that for our mental health. So how do we, create more green-oriented design in our communities? And particularly as we infill, we don't want concrete spaces. We need our spaces to breathe. So how do we do that, and how do we use, green infrastructure or our naturalization to do that? The Urban Forest Master Plan is a really important beginning in that work. We need to kind of bring that work forward and meld it in with the Green Network Plan and some of the things we're learning from the Halifax 2050 around naturalization. And of course, you heard, the importance of water. We have a lot of watersheds in HRM and a lot of water. So it's in every community and it's important and people value it and we love it. So how do we protect it? And how do we make sure development isn't negatively impacting it? I will say that the first regional plan did a great job in thinking about this, and Maureen Ryan and John Charles and some of the people who worked on it at that time really had a vision and really held environmental planning at the heart and really infused that into the plan. So watershed planning and thinking about water is already in a lot of the work that we do, built into it automatically, which I think was very forward thinking of Halifax at the time. We want to improve our setbacks and consideration of watercourses and wetlands, and we're always learning about this with the province and trying to improve our management. And certainly coastal area management, the Coastal Protection Act we've all heard a lot about, is coming down, and we've got to upgrade our regulations to match that, and see if it makes sense to us, and if there's any need in particular areas where there's vulnerable infrastructure to go even further. So I'm speaking a lot, but this is just the infamous Green Network ecology map. So it's something we sort of have been staring at a lot and speaking to community about, and trying to figure out how to bring this down to the ground and how to make it work, at a regulatory level, which is always the challenge in planning. How do you make something that's as big and broad as this apply at the site level to everyday properties and development? So theme 9 is leading through action and climate, and Shannon Miedema and her team have done a phenomenal job and created a plan. Council's taken a leadership role and declared a climate emergency and really pushed us on climate change, which has been wonderful. And now there's a lot to do. And we'll continue to support Halifax, and we talk regularly with Shannon's team around that. Obviously, decarbonization of transportation, anything we can do around that. We know the management strategy that we took, the approach we took way back in 2006 has helped us. Having that growth boundary has helped us in responding to climate change and our goals around having a more climate resilient community. We are thinking about construction, thinking about how our land use relates to technology. And this is just a continuous state of improvement. I'm hopeful that green technology will just, shoot through the roof, and we'll be constantly updating our regulations to make sure that there aren't any barriers to technology. I think we need to stay away from over-regulating and really try to make sure that we're opening the doors for these technologies to come online. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but we have to assess climate risk and community preparedness, and we are speaking again with Shannon Miedema and Erica Fleck about this, and we've flown LiDAR, generated LiDAR mapping, and are beginning the process of assessing our vulnerability to sea level rise and storm surge, and starting to do that work as well. So that's work that this plan will set up for and organize around. So that was a crash course in some of the key pieces of that we're focused on from an environmental standpoint. There's a lot more in the document, obviously, but we just wanted to end on the link to the website, our email address, and our phone number. We know not everyone can use the internet, so our phone number is 902-233-2501 if anyone wants to give us a call. And we'll continue to update people on events and engagement through those channels. Thank you.
Kate, thank you very much for the presentation. As always, very good presentation on your behalf. I believe that Councillor Austin has the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it has to be a quick one. I have to go grab some kids here imminently. So there's a lot here to digest, and I'm happy to hear the position papers are up online, because there's some more reading homework to be done.
I know, I'm sorry.
Center plan, regional plan, what's not to love? So with the center plan in mind, when we talk about the bylaw simplification, and I mean, just my own take here, we really need a new name for that. I mean, bylaw simplification is such an undersell of, to me, what we really need to do with that project, right? Suburban growth, as we know from our growth targets, is not going away. Right? We're not going to stop growing in the suburbs. What we need to do is we need to be building our suburban growth needs to be more sustainable. And, I don't think I don't think like when you choose to go live in the suburbs that you suddenly become some other species of human being that is suddenly not interested in living in a community where you have a store in your neighborhood, where things are within walkable. Like, I think we sometimes get polarized into this, urban versus suburban, but fundamentally, I think, we're all serving people. And the reality is there's not enough space in the regional center to provide enough housing for everyone out there who's interested in living in a walkable neighborhood. We need to provide these things out in the suburban areas. And, the lingering fear that I have is just that are we actually going to commit to that, to doing a suburban type exercise of the same sort of nature of the center plane? Because fundamentally, that's what we need to do. We need to be looking at Cole Harbour Road. We need to be looking out at Herring Cove and Spryfield, and they need the same sort of attention and an effort that we're just wrapping up in the regional center to make sure that we're growing sustainably. And so I'm just wondering, I haven't had the chance to read any of the position papers yet. Is that where we're the indication where we're leading to in this process in terms of a regional plan recommendation to kick for that project? Like where does that fit?
Yeah, so the regional plan, the 2014 regional plan, as an example, identified the regional center as an important place to focus our efforts and said, we've got to create a plan for this area and get organized around how development will occur. So what we envision is that this regional plan will do the same and basically create the program for our suburban and rural areas. We know council wants to work ahead on that a bit. So we also are thinking about how can we organize, because we've done a lot of work already. We've done the rapid transit strategy. We've assessed where development can go. We know where we need to organize around. Can we do some work as part of the regional plan to think a little bit more about form and what that intensification looks like and how we start to think about design in those suburban areas, so we can make that part of the conversation that we're having in the regional plan, set some objectives, and then use that to get going and further those community conversations, in Cole Harbour, in Sackville, in all those places.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for the reassurance.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. And those kids you're grabbing, I hope are your kids. So good luck with that.
Well, my wife just yelled through the door that she got off her call. So apparently I'm able to stay with you.
Oh, good. Fantastic. We're glad to have you. Are there any other questions for Kate? Let's see. Oh, there's a question from Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you, Kate, for that impressive overview of what you've been up to for the last, 5 years, at least, probably getting ready for this one. I hardly know where to begin, but I guess I'm wondering when you're working with the Green Network Plan and you're working with transportation plans, are there ways to overlap active transportation and connectedness for parks and wildlife corridors in order to have safe places for people to walk and cycle and that sort of thing, while at the same time having conservation work at a scale that is also good for nature? So I hope you're following my question, but can we overlay those transportation goals and parks and conservation?
Yes, I think absolutely there's a great opportunity in that. So thank you for raising that. I keep forgetting to say through the chair to the councillor, my apologies.
Okay. No.
So yes, there's an absolute opportunity. The wildlife corridors are, linear corridors. How much we need to protect them in order to support the wildlife is a question that we have, and exactly how we define those corridors for all sorts of different types of wildlife is another question. I think, stepping back a bit there, I've talked about not doing incremental growth and leapfrogging. Leapfrogging is really, using one piece of infrastructure, one thing, and doing multiple things with it to create the community we want to see. So I think what you're raising is absolutely something we want to do and will do and need to do with community. I will point out that you are speaking to something that was in the Stantec scenario study way back when. They identified that that should be done, that actually we're potentially facing a deficit of green space in the regional center as we grow there. And, as we build in the suburban areas, that will be the same, thing that we need to make sure we're accounting for and designing our communities appropriately. So we will be doing that.
Okay, thank you. If I could have just one follow-up, what are the most significant challenges or barriers when you're trying to have those leapfrogging opportunities realized?
Certainly through the chair to the councillor, I think, we have to work across all our departments, and all our departments are barely keeping up with standard operations. So when you start to talk about how do we leapfrog, you're not so popular. No, I'm just kidding. Our colleagues are great. But, I think that is definitely a challenge. We're a growing city. We're in the middle of COVID. We're all feeling it. How do you keep up with everything that's happening right now, with everything that's on the table? It's a lot. But we're having the conversations. So the integrated mobility plan, creating those connections between our teams, has done an amazing thing in creating a new way of thinking in the municipality. So I always go back to that. These plans have integrated our thinking and, made us stronger as we kind of make these decisions. So I think that would be my main answer. I think, resources are always a challenge, and I think we've got to get clear on how we're growing. I think, we've been incrementally focused on growth, and I'll keep coming back to, I think we need to start to work, from 1 million people back and figure out how we're organized around that and get organized as a region before we're organized on specific communities and really focus in on where we're going to put a lot of people probably really quickly. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Seeing no other questions for Kate, just a reminder.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I had my name in the chat.
My apologies, Councillor. The floor is yours. By all means.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. I listened to the presentation at CPED. I got to be a guest there, and again, being able to see it again with the focus around the environmental is really interesting for me. I guess my question builds a little bit on Councillor Austin's point. I get a little concerned when we talk about it's one HRM, then we talk about a regional plan, but then we say, oh, and then there's a study paper around the suburban community planning. So it seems separate as opposed to integrated. And so there, even when, I've spoken about it in the community a little bit about, make sure you get in there, look at the information, take the survey, but people starting to have a hard time identifying where they fit, right? So yes, on the larger issues, absolutely. Those larger, bigger, broader issues, people are really good. But when it looks at that, and as well, I didn't read all of the issue papers yet. Just now, because I'm at City Hall, got your beautiful 3 books, bound books of the regional plan. They're great. They're a little scary. I need to go back to school. I want a younger, faster brain some days, but the learning curve is great. And I guess my only concern and caution is hoping to see more integrated responses looking from HRM out. And so I am concerned all the time when I think about where is suburban, rural in this bigger picture, because sometimes the bigger picture came from a set of assumptions from the 2014 plan and built on that. So are those urban service boundaries, transit service boundaries, are they cut in stone? Is this the opportunity to see them change? Or are they not going to change because the suburban plan is next to, and it will be built on the regional plan? So I worry about that, and I'm just wondering if, Kate, there's a quick way to give me some comfort.
Through the chair to the councillor, I hope I can give you comfort. I'm not sure, but I'll try. So the regional plan will set out where the service boundary is and where the transit service boundary is, and this is the chance to change that. This is the time that we're working on that. You know, we are you know, the suburban areas, the development pattern is sort of what it is. Our, you know, to like the rural areas have existed for a long time, you know, are organized around traditional work industry. You know, we've maintained that similar pattern over time. And I think in most instances, there's a desire to not see that change too much. Where I think there's a new learning that we need to do is maybe in where sort of the suburban area ends, which is what we traditionally call the water and wastewater boundary, and where the rural area begins. And it's not exactly rural, and it's not exactly, you know, urban in the way we always consider it. And I think what we're hearing from council is that's something we need to think about too. And it's an important area that is a little different than just your standard, you know, more natural rural area. So Tantallon, places like that are what come to mind. So I think we have some work to do in thinking about that. And then thinking about, you know, if we are growing and if our population is expanding the way it is, where do we grow next? We've identified the places that we're going to grow to 2031 based on 1% population growth. We're at 2%. We don't anticipate that slowing down. Where are we going to expand, and how is that going to change those different communities? And I think it's important to do that at the regional scale first, and sort of we can talk to different communities about how they're changing. You know, talk to different councillors about how your area might change within that regional framework and what we're seeing, and make those talk to one another. I guess those two plans. So that's sort of how we do it. I hope that helps a little bit, but happy to talk more about it offline too.
Yeah, it does. You know, just knowing that you have that, you know, well, I knew you had that awareness. Sorry, but just hearing it, giving voice to it is really good, because especially when you think 54% of residential growth has between 2014 and 2019 has happened in the suburban area. So that speaks a lot to. So if that's where the growth is, should we not have a good amount of energy there as well? So, you know, I'm so looking forward to this learning, this journey we're going to take, and seeing what happens when we get this plan together. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Kate? Seeing none, colleagues, just a reminder, as Kate had identified earlier on in our presentation, the PSA went out today. You're looking for feedback for the regional plan, so please do your best to push that out to your residents and see if we can get lots of feedback for the committee. Thank you so much, Kate, as always. Truly appreciate your work, and thanks to all the committee. There's a lot of heads in this one, I know, but thanks. And we'll work on Councillor Austin about the construction traffic in your neighborhood too. So,
thank you.
All right, great. So next, let's see. Members of standing committee, boards and committees, motions, and in camera. It's a big none for all of those. Are there any added items? Seeing no added items, any notice of motions? No notice of motions. Well, this comes to public participation. I'm quite pleased we actually have this, because one of the most frustrating things from a council perspective I personally had since the pandemic arrived in our lives was the fact that at our standing committees and at our regional councils meetings, rather not a regional council, but community council meetings, we no longer had public participation. And now we're able to, we made the change with using different formats and Zoom and such. We now can have back at the standing committees and at our community councils public participation. So the way that works for those of you watching at home is that, as a reminder, if watching from home, in order to have signed up as a speaker at the end of one of these committee meetings, the deadline is the 4:30 the day before. So contacting the clerk's office, and we put you on the list and you get to speak. So we do have one speaker today, and so that is registered with the clerk's office. So that person, I believe, is Karen McKendry. Karen, are you with us today?
Yes, and now I'm unmuted.
Yeah, well, hi, Karen. Welcome to our standing committee. We truly appreciate it. You have 5 minutes, and so I ask you to direct your comments to the chair and keep them respectful. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say with us today. So I give you the floor.
Well, thank you so much to the chair and to this committee for hearing from me today. It's very much in line with what you've already been hearing about today. So what I wanted to share with you is I work with Ecology Action Center. You've heard from Meredith with her RHRM Alliance hat on today. And I work with Meredith as well, but my focus is on the wilderness team. So I look at things like parks, protected areas, biodiversity, and access to nature. So what I wanted to share with you today is a little bit about what to anticipate as far as EAC's response to the Themes and Directions document, and 3 aspects I'm really looking into and we'll be talking publicly about in the coming weeks. So there are multiple staff right now that are looking at Themes and Directions and forming our ideas. I mean, we've been waiting for this for like a year, so we've been thinking about it for a bit. And we'll be coming out publicly with what we think about it from the perspective of complete communities and transportation and food and the environment and those kinds of things. So 3 things are already emerging for me from a parks and protected areas and wildlife perspective. The first one we've talked about already, or I've heard about already a lot today, is 2 growth centers. The one at Sandy Lake and the one called Highway 102 corridor, but really is Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes area. So there is still a conflict brought forward from the 2014 regional plan about framing these areas as growth centers that it's very much looking like the city would like to have progressed to development. And then community and sometimes HRM making a strong case that these areas need to stay wild. So that is reflected in Themes and Directions in 2 different themes, one saying growth centers, let's take a look at that and consider the environment, and another area saying these are wilderness parks that HRM is going to continue on. So that conflict needs to get resolved. And one challenge there is we don't have a great framework for making the case for wilderness that is comparable to the case that we're looking at for wide growth. I do want to see more justification around why those 2 growth centers are there, but then we don't have a great framing for how do we, put in a table the kinds of things HRM wants to achieve through wilderness parks and then compare when those 2 are in the same place. The second thing I want to bring up is I'm encouraged that HRM wants to work on more protections for the environment, and encourage you to be really creative with the tools that HRM already has. And there's some hints of that already in there. But I also know that HRM is challenged by abilities that you don't have under the charter, and that it would be helpful to have some changes under the charter to work on the environment. And I want to work on those with you. So if HRM could articulate some of the charter asks that have not been responded to or that you want right now, EAC is in that great intermediary position where we're happy to try to work with all levels of government to see advancement on the environment. So let's work on some of those charter changes that could be really helpful and still be really creative with the tools that you already have. The third area that I'm looking into that is looking promising is there's a number of things there on wilderness parks and sort of those parts of the parks program that are wilder. I think there's some great elements there, but they're a little bit disconnected from each other. So for example, it introduces the term wilderness parks and says we're going to work on these 5, but there isn't any explanation about why those 5 and how those 5 and on what time frame. There's a great aspect in there about level of service standard, which would be in line with other Canadian cities. How close are we to parks? But then there's also mention of a park spectrum. Neat. I think that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. But how do those things all connect to each other? How do we find a level of service for people to access wilderness parks and what to expect when they go? I feel this could be unified by a park strategy, which is separate than a green belting strategy and definitely occurs in other Canadian cities. So if you think of parks as just one slice of green belting, we do need to articulate how we're moving forward on parks, where, when, why, and I think could also have a new conceptualization of parks because Themes and Directions continues to mostly conceptualize parks as a facility that HRM manages and not as an area where we're working on climate change and making advances there. So it's not well framed as a climate change benefit and what we can do on biodiversity and wilderness loss through the tools we have at HRM. So my third point is maybe we need to think about a unifying theory of matter for parks and a framing of them for HRM that's not just as a place to go to recreate. So I leave those thoughts with you and welcome any questions now, but also offer myself to you in the coming weeks as you see EAC statements come out. I'm happy to elaborate on those or hear your thoughts, and I really want to help you in this really critical time that we've realized.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. I do see that Councillor Austin might have a clarifying question. Councillor Austin, you have the floor.
Thank you. I know we don't do the kind of back forth public participation. I just wanted to comment for tomorrow's council agenda when it goes live. It does have an info report updating on our legislative requests. So that would be a handy thing for anyone interested on all of HRM's outstanding list of stuff with the province. Thank you.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, Karen, we're very eager to get that list dealt with too. So we're on the same page. Look, I appreciate you speaking to us today. Thank you. You're always welcome. And thank you for the work that you and your group does on a day-to-day basis.
Actually, Councillor Mancini, or Chair.
Yep.
Could I ask a question? I was a bit slow off the mark there with my on the chat.
No problem. Councillor
Okay.
Morrison, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask, thanks Karen for your presentation, and I wanted to ask a little bit more about the idea of a park strategy. What can you say a little bit more about where you see the gaps right now, and what you think a strategy might help HRM do that we're not currently doing?
Sure. So to the chair, thank you. To the chair through you. Sorry, I don't usually speak in these terms. Thank you, everybody, including the chair, for that question. In this case, I mean, I think a park strategy would be great outside of the situation of a regional plan review. But why I see it as more urgent right now is we have these disconnected elements that we want to work on around parks. So, you know, this Themes and Directions introduces for the first time the word wilderness park. And defines it. Great. Is that going to be one of our classifications of parks? Because HRM already has a classification scheme like a neighborhood and community and regional park. And then we talk about access to nature in one aspect of it and level of service, and recognize that people need access to, you know, play parks with grass and play structures, but there's a little bit of wording in there that we need access to wilder nature too. So you could connect all these dots through a park strategy. The other way I think it could be really helpful right now is there has been that tension between community groups who really want to advance some of these wilderness parks, but don't have clarity officially from HRM about the time frame they're going to be worked on, how they're going to be worked on, and specifically how community is going to be engaged in that process. So a strategy could say we're going to work on this park for the next 10 years because it's part of this larger vision. So it would just be an articulation document at minimum is how it would be helpful right now.
Okay, and if I could have a quick follow-up. I worked in conservation for a number of years before becoming a counselor, and I know there is a growing understanding of the need for wild places in urban areas, but also how that can be part of a city's climate change strategy by protecting nature. So it can kind of solve multiple things at the same time. I don't know if you see a strategy having that in it as well, or if that's a little bit outside what you had in mind.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor and other councillors, I think there are nuggets of our existing plans that we've already committed to that have to do with parkland, especially wilder parkland and acquisition. So in Halifax, which I wish had had more about wilderness and using nature-based climate solutions, which can be done through growing parks, there are 2 actions in there towards parks, including acquiring more parkland. So it's in there as an action. We have to deliver on it, but there isn't a plan on how parkland acquisition would help with our climate change goals. And Halifax Green Network Plan says parks are going to be a part of that. They are not the only solution to green belting, but there isn't like written out the trickle down of how are parks helping with green networks. I mean, conceptually, parks can be core areas where you have high biodiversity and wildlife populations, and corridors are often less suitable habitat that wildlife moves through to get to your core areas. So again, more development around a park strategy could just like articulate that's exactly how parks are going to help with that and how they're going to help with that.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Councillor. See no more questions. Once again, Karen, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So colleagues, to finish up the meeting, our next meeting is scheduled for July the 7th. And I want to thank all staff for the support. Madam Clerk, thank you for your help today. And if we can, someone put a motion forward for adjournment. We can stick around longer if you like. So, Councillor Morris, your motion for adjournment, that's fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Be safe and out there and enjoy the good weather while it's here. All the best, everybody. Cheers.